We've built out something that nobody else in the Cosmos space has built out quite yet. Discoverability tends to be like the biggest problem. I don't think people realize like what we're doing on that side of things, and you're going to start to see those projects go live here over the next couple months. But what's really most interesting is sending messages or contract calls.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bare Metal Podcast. This is your Ship to Code from Archway X, talking today to Griffin Anderson from Archway. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So Archway, a chain that's been making waves for a while. I remember the campaign and the original sort of the tweets around we're going to change the economy around dApp. So I'm super interested in that. Can you give us sort of an intro into Archway? Why you guys started doing Archway? What's the core value proposition?
Yeah. So just quick context on my background. I was fortunate enough to be a very early hire over at Consensus and came in the Ethereum space at a very, very early time and went through all the craziness on the Ethereum side for many years. But I got a little disenfranchised as a developer, partly because at the end of the day, if you believe in the fat protocol thesis or any of these other things, the value accrues kind of towards the L1. And I was looking at the landscape in 2019 going, okay, I want to go build a dApp, but if I go build on top of Ethereum, I'm driving more value, users, and activity to that underlying ecosystem, but I have no way of capturing the value myself. I have no way of sharing in those rewards. And so that's where the idea of Archway is like, can we design an L1 that incentivizes like all the different ecosystem participants, not just the validators or miners that are running the network, but can you start to really incentivize developers and end users and other major stakeholders that are part of these ecosystems in a more fair way, and basically allow them to capture some of the value that they create and bring to the underlying ecosystem and chain. And so that was the underlying like premise and idea for the Archway protocol. So since then, what we've done is we are in the Cosmos ecosystem, but we're a generalized L1, but have designed the protocol over the last 3 years to basically share rewards directly with the dApp developers building on top of the network. The same way we share rewards directly with like validators for running nodes of the network, we do the same thing at the dApp and at the application layer. And we can dive more into those details here in a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. I'm pretty interested in how you guys are accomplishing that, right? There's an established sort of mechanic for rewarding the validators that where the rewards are proportional to stake. There are some slashing mechanism to keep them honest. How did you guys design the reward scheme for dApp developers, right? And how did you guys think about mitigating certain problems like, potentially, network DOS attacks, like trying to get a lot of usage of one app? How do you guys think about it? Is that a risk or is that not a risk? Like, how does the scheme work?
Yeah, for sure. And we've never actually been like hacked, which is kind of interesting. And the network's been live for a while. But so the way it works is ultimately, from an economics perspective, the gas fees are always going to be higher than what the dApp developers earn as rewards. And that's designed to basically prevent that civil attack, somebody hitting the contracts many, many times. But we have multiple mechanisms the community's built into the protocol in order to make sure that dApp developers like receive a material amount of rewards. And so the first mechanism we do is we just share some of the gas fees back directly with the dApp developers. So every time somebody uses one of your contracts, you receive some of the rewards just based on the gas fees. The second is we share some of the emission and inflation with the dApp developers based on block space usage. So typically, most inflation or emission schedules would go directly to the validators running the network or the miners running the network, and
the stakers, right?
And the stakers and the delegators and folks delegating to the network. What we've done is we've actually shared some of that emission directly with the dApp developers building on top. And then the third thing what we've done, which is probably even the most interesting thing, is we've designed inside the protocol something called contract premiums. And it's like an added fee the developer can set on their contracts when they deploy them on chain. And so what happens is you can basically raise the gas fees for anybody interacting specifically with your dApp. And then any premium you add to that fee, you as a dApp developer get to receive, that full amount of premium. So if you feel like, the gas fees are not sufficient enough, if you're building certain types of utility-based dApps where you feel like, hey, I'm not receiving enough rewards, well, you can just easily add on a premium to that fee, and it's all baked in at the wallet level. So the end user just signs and clicks one transaction. It works the same as paying normal gas, and that's all baked in. And so then what happens is all those fees accrue on an address. And what's so cool about it is it can be like your address that you create, or an end user address, or it can be like a smart contract address. And so you can even pick that smart contract address, and then you can do whatever you want with those rewards at those addresses. You could funnel those rewards into a DAO and share it with everybody that's like contributing and building. You can redirect it back to your end users as like referral programs. You can use it to subsidize gas costs. You could use it to incentivize liquidity. You can basically design and use the rewards in whatever way you want. And we try to encourage dApps to basically give it back out to the end users. And so what we're really trying to do is get this additional stakeholder, both the developers and the end users, a stake in the underlying protocol. And this is kind of the mechanism we do that through.
Let's sort of dig into those gas fees. You said a proportion of those fees, goes back to the dApp developer whose contract was called. And who controls the proportion? Is that set by the token holders? Is that a governance parameter?
Yeah. So currently, right now, it's all set by governance, and governance can adjust those parameters. We share 25% of the emission schedule directly with the dApp developers. Some of that's adjusted based on block space fillage. So, and that's a Sybil resistant issue. So as block space fills, technically the rewards shrink just a little bit. But that's one mechanism. And then in terms of gas fees, we actually burn half the gas fees, and then we redirect half the gas fees back to dApp developers. So similar to EIP 1559 and other stuff, what we, as the dApps get more and more usage and we fill more and more block space, more and more gas and tokens are burned. So it also solves that problem as well. So currently right now, those are both parameters that are set at governance. There's a lot of folks in the community that are evaluating those economic parameters, and we'll probably adjust them as time goes on as we kind of like dial in like what the right amount of allocation is and share is. It's one of these balancing acts where you're trying to incentivize delegators and validators to continue to run and operate nodes and participate in the network and secure the network. And then at the same time, you're trying to make sure that there's enough incentives for the dApp developers to want to build on top of the network as well. And so it's this consistent like kind of balancing act. The contract premiums is completely set by the developer themselves. So when they go to deploy their smart contracts, there's extra metadata and fields that they can set on deploying their contracts, and they can just alter and set their gas fees to whatever they want. And so for every contract call, you can set it for 5 gas, for instance, and or 5 Arch or 10 Arch or whatever the case is. And those go directly back to the dApp developer. By default, it's set to 0, but we definitely have a lot of third-party developers that that are adding that premium on for all kinds of reasons.
I'm curious, could I set different sort of premiums for different contract calls in my contract, or is it a single price per any function that I call in the contract?
Today it's set per contract. Excuse me. It's set per contract. So, but what we're seeing is dApp developers start to modularize their contracts. So when one contract is inheriting another contract or contract to contract calls, those premiums, what makes Archway so complex and so unique as a protocol is each contract that calls another contract, that premium is added on. So the end user will pay this total premium amount. but then each contract pays a premium to call another contract and another contract. So we see a lot of that modularity happening throughout the protocol, which is kind of interesting.
You mentioned that you were still, it's a balancing act to somehow redistribute those rewards between different players or actors, related to the Archway ecosystem. I guess you guys are still sort of finding the sweet spot. Your mainnet went live pretty recently. And if we take a step back, what are the things that you're seeing post mainnet? Like you guys went live, right, a few months back. Who are the key protocols that have been onboarded? What are the most active dApps? What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we're just like, so we're about 4 months live. And I would say we're at the stage in the protocol where the foundation's been laid and we're seeing just a whole bunch of integrations happening behind the scenes. So I think we're, integrated with like maybe 7 or 8 different wallets at this point. We're integrated with different front ends, block explorers, everything else. And so I would say we're like, if we were to use an analogy, we're building a house. Like today we have the cement floor, and now you're seeing like us over the last 4 months putting like plumbing in, electrical, everything else into the house. And so it's not really cool. It's not like a fun house you can go and play in per se, because what you're seeing is just like the foundation being put in place. And that typically takes a lot of protocols. Even the ones that launch with a lot of fanfare, it can take like a year to like just get that like underlying infrastructure in place and across the board. But we do have a lot of great dApps building on top of the protocol. One of them is called Astrovault. It's an AMM on top of the protocol. There's another one
Shout
called...
out to Eric. He's been on this podcast as well.
Awesome. Yeah, he's great. The team's great. We have ArchID. I think we're getting close to about 100,000 Arch domains have been collected so far, which is pretty good for a name service. Just a few months launched, so they're growing pretty fast. We have a bunch of NFT marketplaces. Trivium comes to mind. PayPal, which is like NFT, claiming of tickets. We have a lot of the products that you would see in Cosmos are planning to deploy on top of Archway as well and go cross-chain. So Calc Finance is going to be deploying here real soon on top of the protocol. A lot of these other DeFi components that you see that have gone cross-chain. And then a lot on the gaming side. Take a look at Archway Fun Team. They're building out like unique games. I think a lot of people know Gelato. Obviously, they're deployed on top of us. But you're seeing a lot of the dApps just deploy cross-chain, deploy on top of Archway. And then there's just tons and tons of individual developers that are building in the space. I would definitely go check out the ecosystem page to get a better view of what's happening.
What do you think is the most important thing that should be built on Archway today? Like, do you have a sense of what the community is requesting? Like, what you guys are in the channels, in the chats. What are the things you guys are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the community is very much hungry for DeFi right now across the board. I would say that's what the broad community is looking for. We've seen just a lot of interest in that space, and we're starting to see those like components come together, like liquid staking. So from Liquid Finance, we see algo stables starting to come on. And so we're starting to see these like discrete components kind of come together. A lot of the teams wanted to wait until we went live before they really started to dive in and start building. There's always platform risk, things like that. So they've been building for the last 3 months, and you're going to start to see those projects go live here over the next couple months. So that's what they want. What I'm most interested in, though, is like a lot of utility-based dApps. So Archway Protocol, you have to look at its competitive advantage compared to other protocols in the space. And it does really, really well for more utility-based dApps that are maybe have a hard time like monetizing or with like a typical governance token. So if it doesn't really fit that model where that dApp doesn't lend itself to a good governance token, or it doesn't make sense selling like an NFT or something along those lines, Archway is actually a pretty good model to just receive rewards based on usage of your protocol. And so even those two verticals every L1 has right now across the space, Archway lends itself to building out use cases that could really benefit from just earning a recurring rewards for usage of your contracts. So anything more utility based, we see a lot of folks working on like math libraries in the base and smart contracts, oracles, where it's an off-chain process and you need to receive rewards to pay for those off-chain processes. We see a lot of more like, any off-chain services, AI services, things like that, where they're trying to post like AI images on chain and stuff like that. Archway lends itself more to that kind of stuff, those utility-based products, because it offers a pretty sustainable business model behind the scenes.
You mentioned the word cross-chain and sort of interacting with other chains a lot, and think of like my mental image is now you're thinking of sort of Archway as the hub where the logic of the smart contract or the DApp is then concentrated or located, and then it's using sort of IBC to reach out to these other chains and then execute some logic. Like that feels like it's very, it requires a very strong infrastructure. You got to get those IBC channels functional.
Oh, yeah.
You have enough relayers everywhere. How are you guys doing on infrastructure? Is that all covered? Is that all working? Like, are you guys looking for more validators to sort of run relays?
Yeah, that's definitely like, so when I talked about like putting the plumbing and electrical in place, that's certainly the stage we're at. So on the relayer side, we're definitely looking for more folks to run relayers. It's been a slow process, but we've built out something that nobody else in the Cosmos space has built out quite yet. We've built out the way we run a relayer stack is we do have inside Phi Labs, and just for context, I work for Phi Labs, a core contributor to the Archway ecosystem. Inside Phi Labs, we have a big DevOps team, but we actually don't run the relayers ourselves because it's just not scalable to do it all in-house. We really need to rely on third parties to do that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the validators, as part of delegation agreements with the foundation, they've agreed to basically run relayers on our part. But what we do is we do have these fee grant side of things. So the relayers don't have to pay for the native Arch and signing the transactions. They can actually pull from a pool. And so that helps subsidize their fees. They still have to pay for the underlying infrastructure and DevOps costs, but that's baked into the business, I guess, of validating the network in general. But what's so interesting of what we've been working on right now, and it's kind of a race to get this done, is just complete monitoring of these relayers. So if you go into the community's Discord, like as soon as that relayer goes down, like the operators of the relayers get pinged immediately across the board. We're getting redundancy across a bunch of different channels. So I would say like the reliability, and anybody who's worked with IBC and the relayers, like it sounds better than what it is on the ground. It often goes down, and there's a lot of technical issues. There's all kinds of reasons these relayers stop. It's still pretty new technology, but what we've really done here over the last couple of months is built out, I would say, like a sustainable infrastructure to really monitor, manage the relayers. They're getting to the point where we'll have the relayers will automatically be spun back up and reset. And so I would say our reliability the first couple of months were not as great as I'd like. And anybody who's worked in Cosmos knows it's like whack-a-mole all the time. But all that underlying infrastructure is now there. So like if you're running a relayer on top of the Archway network and it goes down, you're going to get pinged right away. You're also seeing like dashboards and everything else that will be coming out in the springtime that will basically monitor like your performance of the relayer, what's your uptime across the board, and all that stuff, and just more analytics around the operating side of the relayers. And we hope that like just incentivizes everybody in the ecosystem to really not think of relaying as like a second operation to their validator, but you think of it as more as like a need to differentiate yourself if you can really provide
a separate
more
service.
A separate service
and offering on behalf of the network.
Yeah. So much of work has been doing that. I know Informal Systems got some like initial dashboards, but we're pretty far ahead on the technical side. but to build out this infrastructure in a way that's like extremely scalable, that can monitor and manage, thousands of different IBC routes and things like that. It takes time getting this infrastructure out. So that's why I say so much of what we're doing is at like that plumbing electrical layer right now, and just kind of trying to get it together. So that's a little context on the IBC side.
We already touched on the next months or Q1. Let's sort of focus on the plans now. Like, what are the things that are in the pipe for, let's say, Q1 of 2024? Are there any new dApps coming online? Are there any changes or ideas around their word structure?
So inside Phi Labs, we'll be having an NFT marketplace launching in early January Q1. So we're very excited about that. Just to offer just a high quality product to the community, and we're working with the NFT teams that are in the ecosystem right now. The first collection that I'll be launching is called Archies. It's done by some creative artists in Europe, and there's a whole bunch of other very fun NFT artists that are planning to launch their collections on top of the protocol and are lined up. So definitely take a look at that. There's going to be a lot of work in there. Some things that will be out in January as well. And you might get a glimpse of it even by the end of this year, is Arch Connect is getting a big makeover and upgrade across the board. So we hope that, so today when you come to the Archway ecosystem, you have the main website, which is kind of like the main brochure. We can get all the interesting information on like what's happening inside the ecosystem. We've really focused at the developer level with all the developer documentation and tutorials, and we have like whole bunch of third-party platforms. Like Kai recently was like adding docs to the docs. So that's becoming like a major content hub for developers that are building our ecosystem and building on Cosm Wasm in general. But what we've really lacked in the ecosystem is a place for like end users to go to, right? So we got the brochure, and then we got a place for the developers, but what we don't have really at the end of the day is a place for end users to come and interact with the dApps and discover the different ecosystem. And after talking with many different dApps, both in the Archway community, broader Cosmos in general, like discoverability tends to be like the biggest problem. Like people just want eyes on their products. They want a user base to get to right away. So Arch Connect is planning to be this like homepage place for the Archway community where not only can you easily bridge and get Arch and stake and vote and everything else, but inside it, we also have embedded third-party dApps as well into the protocol too, where you'll get simplified functionality of the dApps right from the Arch Connect platform. And then for any more like advanced functionality, you'd obviously link out to their website and wherever they're hosted and so forth. But it's designed in a way to like kind of streamline that user experience across the board, and hopefully is designed in a way that really just drives more users to the underlying dApps, which is really what they want at the end of the day.
Are there any innovations around the core tech in terms of what the blockchain can do with smart contracts around the fee structure? You've discussed a lot about what the reward structure is, but are you guys thinking of extending that, or do you have some ideas based on the current usage on what else to do?
Yeah, we do.
Fees?
So there's a lot of fun stuff that's been happening. So we'll continue to expand and grow in this like reward system. Like we're thinking of different ways to basically get dApp developers as many rewards as possible based on usage of their products. So there's going to be more. There's a lot of thought around customization of like them being able to sell their own block space for whatever price they want. And that has to do with the gas itself. So customizing of all that, figuring out different ways to basically get them more material rewards. So there's a lot of thought there. There's also a lot of big technical innovations that are coming out. So currently right now in the ETH community and just broadly Cosmos, there's only 2 ways right now to call contracts. Like either an end user has to sign a transaction and call the underlying contract, or it's a contract to contract call, which means, if you're if you're doing a DeFi product and you're swapping a stablecoin, you might use a DEX that then swaps the underlying stablecoin, which is a separate type of contract, which is a contract to contract call. So today, those are like only the two ways to interact with contracts and the dApps. Well, we're adding a third way where the chain itself is going to be able to call contracts. And so you can start to set automated processes within the blockchain itself. So what you can do is you can say, all right, every other block, please do this action and call this contract. Every 15 minutes, do this kind of action. So you get these Damien type automated processes, which opens up even more unique use cases. So like if you're trying to do like building trading bots or things like that, you can rebalance pools automatically by just setting it on the contract. You can do things like easily move rewards or set up automated processes like automated cron jobs and things like that, all built right into the protocol itself. So hopefully that will give the dApp developers even more fun, more flexibility in the types of dApps they could build across the board.
When you said the blockchain is going to call the dApp contract or a smart contract, where are the fees for that going to come from? Does the developer have to preload a wallet that's going to then pay for the fees, or how's that managed?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So they would have to pre-fund the smart contract and prepay for that gas usage. So it's basically the contract itself calls the blockchain that then recalls the contract itself. And so that's how it works. So you have to have some arch in the contract to actually facilitate and do that. But what it does is it kind of like pre-schedules, the way it works is it pre-schedules transactions out into the future, which is kind of interesting. So that's technically how it works. And so as a developer, you put a bunch of gas in your contract, it's custodied in the contract, and then you set it out like 15 blocks later, 1,000 blocks later, or and you can easily adjust the time in that case. So you could get roughly about an hour out or every 2 hours out. And what happens is it just presets that transaction to be called at that specific block time, block stage. So that's kind of mechanically how it works. It's pretty complex from a technical perspective, and I encourage all the developers go through the docs and learn more about how that works.
There's also a thing called fee grants per smart contract. Can you talk more about those?
Yeah, so today in the Cosmos SDK, there's been some work at the module layer. So fee grants is basically a pool of tokens you can set aside. So in this case, you can set a bunch of Arch tokens into a specific pool. And what happens is every time somebody wants to interact with your contract, it actually, instead of pulling the gas fee from the end user, what it does is it pulls the gas fee from this pool of tokens you've set aside. And you can put all kinds of qualifications on who gets a pull from that pool and pay for those gas fees. So you could set controls like only first-time users of my application get free gas. You can set it like you can even start to do more permission things like anybody who downloads my wallet can use free gas, and you can even use as like proxy contracts to everything else. So if you're like building a wallet and you just want to offer like free gas to all anybody working and playing around in the Archway ecosystem, and you're like, hey, I'm just going to eat that cost initially. I think it's better for the user experience. They don't have to get Arch. You can go ahead and like pre-fund that wallet and just like pay for all their gas fees on their behalf. And maybe it's not very material because it's a better user experience to onboard new users to your wallet and everything else. And so all they would do is just like go ahead and sign in a transaction. And with account abstraction and all the other stuff that's coming, hopefully it'll be streamlined eventually to where it's just like, you could easily just sign into your regular OAuth provider like Google or something like that. And then, it automatically sets up a wallet, and you can easily just start interacting with dApps right away from day one without having to do like all this crazy onboarding stuff that it takes to get into these L1s sometimes. So it just should streamline things. But yeah, by doing it at the dApp and the application layer, hopefully it just lends itself to a better user experience and covers the gas fees of other folks. That's the fee grant contracts as well.
We've talked a lot about sort of, if Archway is the hub, then you need to have this IBC infrastructure to reach other chains. That's sort of thinking more about the, like, say, Cosmos ecosystem, because IBC is still not that far out, I guess, into other ecosystems. Are you guys thinking of, connecting to, I don't know, L2s on Ethereum, connecting to Solana, connecting to other ecosystems? Is that something that's a focus?
Yeah. Broadly in the Cosmos space, there's separate teams working on that IBC infrastructure. We recently, to prove this out, we recently set up a connection directly with the Icon ecosystem, which is pretty cool. I don't think people realize like what we're doing on that side of things as a test. So yeah, you can easily like IBC into the ecosystem. Right now, today, IBC really just facilitates basically moving tokens from one chain to the other, and like you start to see NFTs being moved. But what's really most interesting is sending messages or contract calls between different chains. And so you get this like orchestration type layer where you can start to set the way it works is you set like up a proxy contract and all the other chains you want to interact with, and then the Archway sends messages to that proxy contract on the other chain that then facilitates the transactions and then sends those messages back to the Archway protocol. And so you can do things like easily, swap a token on Osmosis and move it back to the Archway ecosystem. You can do things like but then as you see IBC become more and more ubiquitous, from Archway, you're going to be able, hopefully in the future, be able to do like cross-chain contract calls to the Ethereum or any L2, and like you can easily swap and access that liquidity. You can easily, and so you get just more composability, I would say, across these different ecosystems. And then the question starts to become, well, as a dApp developer, where do I want to like deploy my contracts? Like, I could deploy it on top of, an L2, but like there's no rewards baked into that underlying protocol typically. And so you can, if you deploy the contracts on top of Arch, you'll receive a bunch of rewards and you can get the same functionality that almost any other chain offers. It's just abstracted away a little bit for the end user. And so it starts to become this kind of like centralized hub in an orchestration layer for everything you want to do across chains.
Future of the interchain happening right now in Archway.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. But there's a lot of other cool projects inside Cosmos that are also working on with similar goals as well.
Where should people go to find the freshest news? Is it X? Is it archway.io? Should they join the Discord? Where is it at?
Yeah, definitely Twitter is probably the best place, or X. And then Discord, we have kind of a lively community there as well. The Archway website is really great for just like basic information of what's happening. But yeah, Twitter is probably going to be the best place X is going to be the best place for all those kinds of announcements across the board. Almost every day there's a new announcement in the community, in the ecosystem. So I definitely recommend people following that main account.
Yeah. So recommending to the listeners to hop onto Twitter and learn more about Archway. Well, thanks very much, Griffin. So that was a fun chat. All the best, and keep chugging in Q1.
Yeah,
let's see all those things come true.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.